To the show. You know, this is the show where we sit back and we make daily conversation with real people about things that's been going on in their lives. And today, my guest is Brian Mansfield, and he is here to talk with us about a touchy subject that most men usually don't talk about. So today, we're going to sit back and we're going to talk about child abuse with Brian on the show. So, hi, Brian, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here on the show. So we wanted to touch bases a little bit about child abuse, though. So could you tell me, when did the child abuse begin with you?
Well, it started when I was about 5 years old and until I left home at 17.
At 17 years old?
Yes.
So could you tell us, what are some of the things that was going on with you?
My mother divorced my biological father when I was an infant. He was abusive to her, and she married my stepfather, who adopted me when I was 11, but he married my mama when I was just before I turned 2 years old. So he was fine and wonderful as far as I knew. He worked, and he was kind to me and things like that until after my little brother was born when I was 5, around turning 5 that year.
Okay, you say that your father was a stepfather,
Yes.
was abusive toward you. So what is some of the things that he would do to you?
Oh, well, the first thing he ever did was he locked me in the closet and thought I would be screaming and kicking to get out, you know, and when I found the light from the keyhole and underneath the door and started playing with my Tinker Toys and my Lincoln Logs, he got really upset and slammed me down in my bed when I wasn't crying to get out. He said, "I'll give you something to cry about," and he'd pick me up and slam me down on the bed. That was the first incident.
So that's the first time your stepfather hit you?
Yes, it hit me, verbal abuse. I'm worthless, never would grow up to be anybody or anything, and expletive, a lot of F-bombs, which I won't repeat because I've tried to get that out of my language myself. You know, I've been known to cuss a lot, and I don't like to do that. So
you think it was a part of the abuse that led you to swear a lot?
Oh yeah, especially when I get angry, especially when I get really angry, and I found myself doing that. Now that I'm home taking care of my mother, who's elderly, I found myself cussing at her, you know, when I hear some of the same things come out of her mouth that came out of his mouth. She was never like that to me. She worked all the time. She didn't know what was going on. And when the final straw, that when she found out that he was actually doing the things and I wasn't lying about it, is when he drew blood on my chest by poking his fingernails through my skin, calling me a worthless piece of S and a worthless, and the best part of me ran down my mother's leg. He left his fingernail marks, and I've got scars on my chest where he did that, and the blood came out, and I showed her, and she threatened to leave him, but she didn't know anything other than waitressing and married to him, you know, since 1971. So, and I was 16 when that happened. She threatened to leave. When I turned 17, I was still in high school, and I left home.
So how long does the abuse last? From the age of 5 to the age of 17?
Yes.
And what were some of the other things that he would do to you?
My first guitar I got, I put it on top of my dresser, and he inspected my room all the time. I had to clean the corners, and I had to have hospital corners on my bed. He's thrown my bedding outside from the second floor, and I've had to go down and pick it up and make my bed right. And even when I've gotten my room completely clean, he'd inspect the drawers, and my guitar was sitting on top of my dresser, and he pulled all the drawers out. And of course, what happens is the dresser started tipping forward, and it tipped on him, and he stood up and slammed the dresser drawers shut. And my guitar had fallen behind the dresser when that happened, when it tipped forward, and he crushed my guitar in a million pieces. So that's the last guitar I got until I was an adult,
now,
actually.
How old were you at that time?
I think I was 13 or 14 years old.
13, 14 years old.
Yeah, it wasn't a school guitar, thank God, because we had school guitars and in school, and I was left-handed, so this is how I wanted to play guitar. And they made me switch to right-handed so I wouldn't break and scratch the neck, because the way we sat in order to learn guitar in the Coburn Elementary is where I went. Coburn Elementary School and Southwestern Junior High. And he wasn't the only abuser. I've had bullies that picked on me all the time. They beat me down and kicked my ribs and broke my ribs, and one left me 5 of them. I can name them all. I won't name their names, but they know who they are. They're in prison. There's Jerry, Tom, Tim, Cliff, and Milburn, or not Milburn, excuse me.
So you're talking about childhood friends?
Yeah, they weren't friends. They were just abusers. They sought
kids
me
in
out
your
to kick my
neighborhood.
butt. Yes,
So you said that the children in your neighborhood were bullies,
yes.
and they would just pick on you for any given reason?
I think it became a game to them after a while, to see if they could catch me, because I was very, very fast.
And they picked on you a lot.
Well, there's 5 specific ones. They sought me out to hurt me.
Did they pick on other children in the neighborhood?
I don't know. I didn't have many friends. I only had 2 other friends, and they lived probably about 5 to 6 blocks away from me. So whether they picked on them or not, they didn't do it while I was around. They just sought me out.
Just sought you out.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first time you remember being bullied was by your stepfather,
Yes.
and he physically and verbally abused you.
Yes. When I come home with bloody clothes and dirty clothes, he would say, "Did you fight back?" And I said, "No, there was 5 of them." And then he'd hit me, and I'd be in trouble and get hit and punished for having dirty clothes because it's school clothes, and he paid for them.
So
That was his
the first
thing.
abuse started, with your stepfather, and that's because you were being bullied by other children, and so your stepfather decided to bully you too.
No. He did that first. I was young when he did that.
Okay. So the first time you was bullied by anybody was by your own stepfather.
Yes.
And after being bullied by your stepfather, it led to other people in the neighborhood, such as other children, bullying you.
I don't know if it was related or not, but yes. I pretty much was a magnet for it, I think.
Okay, now what are some of the things that the children in the neighborhood would do to you?
Well, they would trip me in class, call me crooked neck, poop butt, because I had a crooked spine, and they'd pick on me, push me down into the lockers. I was afraid to go to the bathroom at school all the time, because they'd corner me in the bathroom or the gym, or they'd, just make fun of me.
So what has this done to your life? By being bullied, by kids in school, and being bullied by your stepfather, by children, from your neighborhood. And are these some of the same kids that were going to your school as well?
Yes, when they weren't skipping, they were going to the same school. Yeah, when they weren't skipping school, that's when they caught me. When they skipped school, that's when they caught me. But if they chased me from school, they could not catch me. I was very fast. Long legs and a short torso.
Were you the only child in the neighborhood that they would pick on?
As far as I know. That was the only one. They didn't, I only had 2 other friends. We were in Boy Scouts together. And one moved away, and the other one, his brother was stuck up for him. I'm the oldest in my family, so I had no one to stick up for me.
So the first time you was bullied was by your stepfather. So he started out bullying you, and what was your reason for him bullying you?
I believe work. A lot of times he'd come home angry from work. I thought he had sweet smelling breath when he'd yell at me, but I found out after he passed away in 2012 that he drank. So I didn't know that. He was a closet drinker, schnapps.
So your stepfather was an abusive alcoholic, would that be fair to say?
Yes.
And when your father got drunk, he would take his frustrations or whatever type of emotional feelings that he was having at the time out on you.
Well, I don't think he was drunk. I think he just had enough in him, and he was also...
Well, he was drinking, right?
Yeah, he was also going through a custody battle with my 2 stepsisters at the time, too. So a lot of it had to do with money, because money was a big argument starter with him and my mom, and with him and his own daughters and his ex-wife, and I cost them a lot of money. I had to go to do x-rays, and his HMO and insurance didn't cover it.
So how did you actually cost him a lot of money? I mean, you said you had to go do x-rays and go see HMO doctors, but what was the reason for you to go and have an x-ray being done? Was your stepfather physically beating you up where you had to have x-rays?
No, I was born with my biological father pushed my mother down the stairs when she was pregnant with me, and her stomach hit the rung of the step, and she grabbed the railing, and she ran up the stairs and then punched him in the stomach and said, "I'm leaving you." But when it hit, it stopped the growth of my third cervical vertebrae, which started like that instead of like that. It was not a normal looking vertebrae, and it chipped the fifth cervical vertebrae and caused the curve in my spine. So I had a severe scoliosis from that.
So you
from
had
birth.
scoliosis when you were born.
Yes.
So that really didn't have nothing to do with the stepfather.
No, he just exacerbated it when he picked me up, throw me around.
So you was born with this condition, and then
Call me
some of
names
the
and hang up
reasons
on me?
why your stepfather would bully, you.
I believe he did it because I cost him money, because he's told me I cost him money. That cost
what
too much
way?
money. Clothing, food on the table. You should be happy you got a roof over your head. But I shouldn't get beat down when I'm trying my best to please you by cleaning everything in the house, doing my chores, raking the yard when you ask me to, cleaning up the dog crap. I shouldn't be beat down for it when I do it right.
Well, it's not because you do it right, but no child deserves to be beat down by any parent, whether it's a step parent or a biological parent. You don't deserve to be beat down by a parent. Now, let me ask you, where was your mother at when all of this was going on? Where was your mother?
Working.
She was always working.
Yeah, she was a waitress. She worked long hours, Speeds in Lakeview and Mr. Downs on 20th Street.
Did she ever hear about the abuse that was going on between you and your stepfather?
I tried telling her.
And what would she say?
She would say, "What'd you do wrong?" He said that you did this or did that. And I said, "Yeah, I did that, but I didn't deserve that much of a beating. I had bowel problems. I wet the bed, messed myself, and because I couldn't hold it in, because I think it had something to do with my physical parts. I was a runt, 4'11", and grew very slowly. I was a small child, but stocky and heavy boned.
So you would say that when your stepfather abused you, and you go and tell your mother would be more like on his side?
No, she would confront him about it, but he would lie to her
and say that he didn't hit you at all.
Yeah, or he would justify it by saying I did, poop my pants, or
Was there any physical marks of him abusing you?
Not till I was 16. Not till I was 16. He was very careful about that.
Very careful.
Way? Well, I mean, when you slam somebody down on a bed, you get whiplash a little bit. It hurts for a little while, but it's mostly, you're on a bed, so boom, and the one time he hit me when he thought I was sneaking up on him, he was a Korean War vet. When he thought I was sneaking up on him, he smacked me in the chest and the face so hard that I flew backwards and went across the driveway. And when my butt slid to the grass part, I stopped all of a sudden and my head hit the ground. That knocked me for a loop, and I couldn't see straight for a while. So, I was only about, I want to say 9 years old when that happened. I had a paper route, a bunch of paper routes. He'd get mad if I didn't do the paper route quite right, or the neighbors would call on me for running and jumping the fences in the backyard when I was running from the bullies. I didn't want them to find out where I lived, so I'd run through the backyard, and the neighbors would call and say, "Your son," and that's not my son, and then I'd get my butt kicked for that, You know, I got lots of reasons to cuss and swear about it, but I have since forgiven him for it. No child deserves that. But you can survive it and you can look past it. You know, you have to look at what he was.
So did your stepfather abuse you on a daily basis, or was it just a few times out of the week, or was it?
It was constant. I was so afraid sometimes he would hit me at the top of my feet to wake me up for school. I was so afraid. I had insomnia when I was a kid. I was afraid to go to sleep. So I'd sleep kneeled on the side of my bed so it was nice and tucked, and I'd fall asleep like that. And when I'd hear him come up to the top of the stairs or wake up, I'd get up and be ready for school. I was so afraid to go to sleep at night. When we moved to the new house on Burnham Street, things got really worse. I moved to a different school. I didn't know anybody. So I lashed out in school at first.
What would be some of the things your stepfather would do to you at the new house?
Well, it was a bigger yard. I had to rake all the leaves, clean up the dog stuff. Wasn't my dog. You know, I didn't.
But far
my
as the
mom's dog.
physical abuse, though, because that's what we're talking about.
Oh, the physical abuse, pushing me up the stairs, hitting me, calling me names, calling me worthless. You know, I would take the blame for my kid brother or sister. So I thought.
How many children were in the house?
3.
And did he bully all 3 of you children, or just you?
Just me.
And the reason being bullying just you is what?
I wasn't his kid.
Well, you had it was 3 children in the house, right?
Yeah.
And was they males, females, or?
My half sister and my half brother.
Okay. So who are the other 2 kids belongs to, your half brother and your half sister?
That's my stepdad and my mom. And then there was 2 stepsisters, Teresa and Brenda, who belonged to him and his first wife. They came every other weekend. They used to stick up for me.
So there were 3 children living in the house, and you was not one of his kids, right? But you had a stepbrother, which is a half brother, and a half sister. They were his kids.
Yes.
And then he had 2 other children on the outside of his marriage.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I see. You know, I want to go into a short commercial break, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Brian Mansfield. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm sitting here talking with Brian Mansfield, and we've been making conversation about abuse that just doesn't go on the street, but abuse that goes on in your everyday life inside your home, a place where you shouldn't have to be experiencing any type of abuse. So Brian is here today, and we were talking about the physical and mental abuse that he experienced as a child from his stepfather. So Brian, before we went into commercial break, you was telling me about a lot of the physical abuse that you had to endure as a child, you know, from your stepfather. But through it all, you have survived a lot of that abuse. So tell me, how has that affected your adult life?
When I see it on the street, I say something or I'll do something about it. I can't stand to see some child hit or hurt, or an elderly person hit or hurt.
But how has that affected you as an adult now? You went through a lot of emotional and physical abuse when you was a child. Did you ever receive any type of counseling services for that?
Yes, I've attended counseling sessions. I'm on disability now because I suffer from depression, slight depression, and they say bipolar, but I don't take medicine for it because it made me huge. So it affected me in a way that I'm stronger. I recognize it right away, and I just can't stand it. I can't stand to see it.
Has it enabled you to do something, you know, in your adult life? You know, like, for example, by you being physically abused a lot as a child, how has that affected your adult life? You know, were you able not to do some things in life because of the abuse, you know, that taking place, you know, years ago when you was a child? You know, and if so,
oh, yeah.
you know, how has that affected you? I mean, affect you being a grown up?
Well, relationship-wise, I can't hold on to a relationship very long with a female. I don't have many friends.
Is it
I stick to myself mostly.
would you say that the reason why you can't hold a female with a relationship is because of your physical abuse that happened with your stepfather and the bullies, from school?
Yeah, I was always afraid that I'd turn out that way, and I didn't want to put anybody through that. Although I know in my heart I would never do anything like that to a child, but I didn't. But I've been single so long, and I've been in relationship with women that have had children, and I've got nieces and nephews, and I'm a great person with them. So I think it's given me strength, and in the same sense, it's put me in a shelter inside my heart that's hard to get out of. It's hard to be an outgoing person to a female when you're.
So Brian, tell me, how has the physical abuse from your stepfather affected you in your adult life? Tell me.
Well, I have a hard time with relationships with people, period, because I am aloof. I seem judgmental. I don't drink, I don't smoke, and usually the people that I do know do it. So when the alcohol starts flying, I'll say something about it or I'll leave. So I don't have many friends because of it, because that's just the way I was raised. I'm very easily irritated with some bad behavior, especially when it has to do with a child or elderly
When
person.
you say bad behavior, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about if I see a person out on the street, they hit their child, I'm not going to just stand there and let it happen. I'm going to do something about it. And if I catch it before it happens, I'm going to stop it. I'm going to say something. That's all there is to it.
Because to see that will remind you of how
Yes.
it was when you were, growing up.
Yes,
and
I went through
experiencing a lot of
roommates.
abuse.
Yes, I went through roommates because of that. They start in on their stuff, and I have flashbacks of my stepdad, and I warned him 3 times. I said, if you don't leave me alone, I will throw you through a window. And if, and they'll either push or they'll leave me alone, and then they'll find a reason to get rid of me as a roommate. So,
What was the final stepping ground for you to say I done had enough with this abuse, and I'm going to end this abuse? And what steps did you take to end the abuse that was going on with you and your stepfather?
well, I was working at the time in high school. I asked my mom, can I move out? A friend of mine, his parents moved to Lansing, and we rented their house out for $300 a month. I moved out, finished high school, living away from home. So I stopped when I took the last of my things out of the house to move into the new house, into the room in the apartment actually, but it was a big enough house. I stopped at the bedroom that my parents were laying down, and I told my stepdad, I said, I might not have been the perfect son, but I didn't deserve a lot of what you've done to me. And if I ever hear of you doing that to my mother, I will come back and you will be in jail. I will prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. And as I was walking down the stairs, I heard him say to my mother, I was going to get up and hit him with the head with a baseball bat, but I couldn't get out of bed. It was like someone was holding him down. So I left home, is what I did.
So that's how you escaped the abuse. You eventually left home. But you experienced this abuse for so many years, though, and your mother was aware of that you was being abused to some point. How come your mom never stopped this abuse from the beginning?
A lot of times she didn't know what was going on. She didn't believe me because he didn't leave any marks till I was 16, and he left them in my chest with his fingernails.
Where was your father at, your biological father, during this time?
He had visitation every 2 weeks until I was 12 years old, when I was adopted by name by my stepfather, because he found out that he could write me off on his taxes.
But did you ever tell your biological father that you was being abused by your mother's husband?
Oh, yeah.
And what would he say?
Oh, well, you just let me know. Speak softly, carry a big stick. He was afraid of Jones, too. My biological father was afraid of him. He carried guns all the time. And,
So he was scared of your stepfather.
yeah.
And you said your stepfather carried guns all the time?
No, my biological father
Your
did.
biological father was scared of your stepfather.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, he was the one who had guns.
Yeah.
But he was afraid to go and confront your stepfather about the abuse.
He was more afraid of my mom.
Oh, he was.
Yeah, he was
afraid.
abusive to my mother, so I had the stigma of already being a bad child because I was his blood. So that's
But apparently not bad enough where he would go and confront your stepfather.
right.
Try to help you.
He was
to
a woman
understand
beater.
this. I'm
He
trying
was a
to
woman
understand.
beater. My biological father was a woman beater. Put a gun in her mouth, pushed her down the stairs when she was pregnant with me. He was a woman beater, and my stepdad warned him. I don't care how many guns you got. He was a ranger in the United States Army.
Your stepdad.
Yes.
Okay. So your stepdad, would confront your father
Warned him. Just warned him.
about what?
About my mom.
About your mom.
No, stay
But-
away from here. Stay away from here. You got visitation.
But did
That's
your
it.
stepdad ever warn your father about you?
No, keep him. This is basically. And then when he'd bring me back, see, your own dad don't even want you. Well,
How did that make you feel as a kid to hear your stepfather say something like that? Your own
I cried
dad
a lot. I was a crybaby, a mama's boy.
Basically, it.
Yeah.
So you would just cry about the things that you were experienced.
Went into my own little world. I made forts out in the woods down the street from my parents' house. I was in Boy Scouts. I had focused on that. Became an Eagle Scout. I focused on music, whatever I could to stay away from home. Any chance I got to stay away to do extracurricular stuff.
So you was the only child that would be abused at home, right?
Yes, sir.
And the reason for that was because of what?
I don't know.
Because you were the oldest kid at home, or
I wasn't his child.
he
I
just
wasn't
his child. So he felt that he can abuse you simply because you was not his child.
Yeah, he owned me. I was basically just somebody he could use to get the housework done, I believe, so he didn't have to do it.
So he used you to do the housework, do chores around the house. But don't most kids do chores around the house?
I didn't get an allowance. That's why I had to get paper routes.
Well, some kids would,
I had to pay.
do chores.
I had to pay room and board to live there. Was
So
a kid.
you said your stepfather would charge you room and board to live there?
Yep.
And what age were you at that time?
When I first started getting a paper route, I think I was 13 years old. My first paper route.
And how much money would you make on your paper route?
When I could, I don't know. I don't know. Wasn't very much. 20 or 30 bucks a week, or every 2 weeks. We had the old collection thing.
And you would have to take that money and pay rent with it?
Pay room and board.
Room and board.
Yeah,
So
because
who-
they provided food.
Yeah. So who would you give the money to?
I'll give it to my mom, and she saved it for me. That's what she did.
Okay, so you basically weren't really paying for room and board. You would give your mother your paper route money, and she would put it away for you for something else.
It helped pay for my scout stuff, I think,
Okay.
because scouting is very expensive.
So how would they be paying for room and board?
That's what I was told.
Oh, okay, but in actuality, your mom was just really saving the money for you. She didn't really make you pay room and board.
No, she
So
didn't make me. She didn't make me do anything.
What was some of the most difficult challenges for you living with your stepfather and he was being abusive toward you?
Biggest challenges?
Yeah.
Sleeping, concentrating on school. A lot of things. Trying to get it right the first time so I wouldn't have to do it over again.
Were you one of those children that got into trouble, like, got into fights, or did you ever go and steal things, or?
Yes, I have stolen. I broke into the Coburn Elementary on a Thanksgiving vacation one time.
And how old were you at that time?
Phew. Had to have been 10, 11 years
So you
old.
would get into trouble when you were young.
I got into trouble once.
You got into trouble one time when you were young, and that was breaking into the elementary school. Was that the first time you got into trouble?
No,
That wasn't the first time.
nope. Second time I got into trouble.
Let's talk about the first time.
Okay.
When was the first time you got into trouble?
When I broke into the school.
When you broke into the school. So that was the first time you actually got into trouble, was breaking into the elementary school. Okay. And then and what happened with that situation?
I got probation, had to pay a fine, and got the living crap beat out of me. Got the paddle from Dr. Miller, but the paddle broke, and he called my parents down, and my mom and stepdad, and my mom says, "Well, you don't discipline him, we discipline him." And then I really got in trouble after that when the detectives,
So what do you
talked
mean
to me.
you really got into trouble after that? What happened?
That the trouble starts. When I say trouble, it was always trouble. I was never good enough. I never could do anything right. So I was walking on eggshells constantly. I could never do anything right. Nothing was ever right. And when I take off to go to a friend's or go hide down the street in my fort at the cul-de-sac down the street from my parents' house, he'd come around in that gas company pickup truck looking for me, and then he'd say stuff, "I don't want you crying at her funeral. You're making your mother worry. I don't want you crying at her funeral. I'm going to get you, MRFer," and I'd be throwing acorns and pine cones and trying to hit the top of his little orange light on top of his gas company pickup truck.
So would it be fair to say that because of your own behavior, that your stepfather was only trying to discipline you?
I never smarted off to him. My behavior was on eggshells. I never
Why
talked
would you
back
be throwing stuff at your stepfather?
because he couldn't see me.
I mean, but you were doing things.
I didn't throw it at him. I threw it at his truck.
But you were doing things.
You better get your butt home. You wait till your mom goes to work.
But you were doing things that you wasn't supposed to be doing.
I did that. I did that day.
That day.
No.
See, because I'm trying to get a feel for why because you said that your stepfather abused you from the time you was 5 until the time of age 17. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to get an understanding about
Yeah, physically. He was always mentally
your
abusive.
stepfather and the reason why he was physically abusing you. You never mentioned earlier that you had some behavior problems, such as like throwing things at your stepfather's truck.
He didn't beat me because of that. He didn't know it was me. He just thought it was acorns and stuff falling out of the trees. It was very heavily wooded down there. He didn't know that was me. He had no clue that was me. He could
But
not
would it
see
be fair
me.
to say too that because you making the
I became
statement-
very sneaky. I had to sneak down the stairs so I wouldn't wake him up. I had to do it in between snores.
Well, I would spank my child too, trying to be sneaky.
There's
with
no
me.
spanking.
Well, you get a whooping too from me if you trying to be sneaky and try to do things that you're
I had
not
to.
supposed to be doing. A lot of
Every
kids
little-
say they had to do things, but no, you don't though.
Wait a minute. There's no excuse for beating a child down, physically and verbally, for
I'm
a
not trying to
creak in the
justify
floor.
anything that your
My brother fell off the top bunk when I was a
I'm
little
not trying
kid.
to justify anything that your stepfather may have done to you. Stuff, and it's no excuse for being a child. But let's examine, the level of beatings that you're talking about here. Now, first of all, what type of beating was it? Was it a beating with a bell, or you said it was physical knockout? With his fist. Would he beat you up that way? And if so, did he leave marks on your body? Because you did mention that you didn't get any marks on your body until you was 16.
As far as I know.
So I figured that at the age of 5 years old or 13 years old, if someone is beating you, they're going to leave some type of physical marks on your body.
Yes.
And then if that's the case, then your mom should have stepped in and said that, "I'm not going to have you abusing my child." And then maybe the police should have been
She
called.
did.
She done all those things, but yet you constantly,
Police were never called.
the police was never called.
No.
Your mom
I don't know if they were called when I went to the hospital. I was so afraid to go home, and I had a headache so bad one time that I was put on the reading room floor in 5th grade, and they took me to the hospital, and they gave me a shot, and the headache went away. Well, they had kept me in there, and I went to child psychology after that, and I went for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then they brought my stepdad in from work that day, and my mom took me to this, and they had the big meeting while I was outside, and he came out of that doctor's office and slammed that door open at child psychology and said, I paid this kind of money for that, for them to tell me that. And what the doctor had told him, my mom said that he said, there's nothing wrong with this kid. It's something wrong with you two, my parents, my mom and stepdad. And he was mad, and I was afraid to go home that day too. So I was a normal child growing up, trying to be as normal as I could be, and he just did not like me. He did not like me. He did not like me because I was Dan's son, and Dan did this, and he was the belief of a bloodline is a bloodline, and that's what happens to you. He was probably abused when he was a child. He grew up in Dayton, Tennessee. He was a ridge runner and ran moonshine for the mob, and he got caught, and that's why he went in the service. So he come out of the Korean War.
We'll be right back after this commercial break. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back. Brian has came to the show today, and we sitting back and we making conversation about some of the abuse that he experienced from his stepfather. So Brian, before we went into commercial break, you was telling me about some of the things that your stepfather would do to you. You know, back when you was experiencing abuse from the age of 5 all the way up to the age of 17 years old. So what changed, though, at the age of 17 that turned this abuse thing around for you? Because I know you stated that you would tell your mother about certain incidents that would go on. Your mother would either believe you or she didn't believe you. But then at the age of 17, you start spending more time with your aunt, and your aunt would come and pick you up, and then that gave you a chance to get away from a lot of abuse situations that you was experiencing from your stepfather. But what was that actual, turning point that kind of ended this type of abuse that you was experiencing?
I grew.
You grew?
Yes, I grew from 4'11". Over the period of 2 years, I grew up to 6 foot tall, 195 pounds, solid, athletic.
So that kind of scared your scared your stepfather.
Yeah, and he was more of in the threat stage after that. Baseball bats with things with guns, I'll have my,
So he wouldn't physically abuse you no more, as far as with his hands or with a belt or an object or something of that kind. He would start mentally abusing you, as far as threatening you with guns and other types of objects to hit you with. So basically, the abuse continued, but it wasn't physically. Tell me about that.
Well, he things like still calling me worthless. If I was away from home for any period of time and I'd call home, he would, if he answered the phone, he wouldn't let me talk to my mom, or he'd hang up on me, or he'd say something really derogatory about me and then hand the phone to my mother, I mean, mostly cuss words, which I don't want to repeat on television.
Well,
all the
cuss
cuss
on
words.
This show, no way.
Right.
You don't cuss or swear on this show.
Yeah. So a lot of expletives came out of his mouth where it concerned me, and a lot of threats of physical violence, and a lot of you're worthless.
So he would still say these things to you even after you have moved away from the home and you come back and visit. He would still have those type of things to say.
Yeah, his feelings were hardened. His heart was hardened to me.
Did he drink a lot?
No, not that I know of. I didn't find out he drank until after he passed away 2 years ago. So how much he drank, I know they had some wine and stuff at the Christmas parties at the Battle Creek Gas Company. We'd go see Santa Claus, and him and my mama would have a glass of wine there, or he'd have a schnapps and something, because they'd serve drinks there.
Now you said he passed away 2 years ago.
Yes.
And
going on 3 now.
Going on 3 years now. How does that make you feel that he's no longer here?
I hope he was saved. I hope that he found Jesus in his heart, and that he was forgiven. because hell is not a good place. Not a good place at all. So I hope he's forgiven, because I've forgiven him.
Okay.
I can talk about this stuff, and I get upset sometimes, and it happened, but I hope he's forgiven.
How was your relationship with your stepfather before he passed away?
Well, the last thing he said to me, January 2012, when he was knowing he was dying of cancer, I came to visit, and I was doing laundry, and I was waiting for the laundromat to open here in Battle Creek, and he said, "Get the F out and never come back." That was his last dying words to me. He was sick in the hospital bed at home.
So through your teen years, your 20s, 30s, and 40s, whatever, so he was pretty much still abusive as far as mentally toward you.
Yeah. He never had no qualms about telling me how he felt about me.
So all the way up to his dying days, he still had a lot of hatred toward you.
Yes.
So what do is your mom still living?
Yes.
What does she has to say about all this now that her husband is no longer here?
It's in the past. Let it go. And things like that. I'm sorry. She apologized to me. I'm sorry. I didn't know anything better to do. I was only raised to get married and work, and I was going to leave him, but I couldn't, because I wanted to leave with all the children, and I couldn't do it, Brian. I'm sorry. And she apologized to me.
How do you feel toward your mother?
I love my mom unconditionally. And
even though that she allowed all this abuse to go along with, allow all this abuse to go on, you still have unconditional love for your mom.
She did the best she could with what she had, and I understand that. And I always love my mom. She's my mom.
Right. Well, what about your biological father? Is he still living?
No, he died in '97. Okay. A heart attack on Father's Day. In his sleep. He was overweight and had arthritis of the hips. He lived in Hastings, Michigan, and he passed away on Father's Day after midnight in 1997.
How was your relationship with your father, in your young adult life, after you left home?
My biological father?
Right.
He had visitation every 2 weeks until...
But now that you've grown, in your adult life, have you had any type of relationship?
I had a reaction with him when I was 22 or 23 years old. I wanted to get my birthday present from him that he bought me when I was 11, which was a .357 Magnum Colt in the case.
And he brought you that at 11 years old?
Yeah, he was.
What father would buy their child a gun at 11 years old?
He taught me gun safety. He was big in guns. My mom hated that. He was big into guns.
Okay.
And she didn't like it too well. And he bought me that. And when I was 22 or 23 years old, I found out where he lived in Post Edition, and I went over to see him and asked him for it because I wanted to be in law enforcement. I was going to go to college to be in law enforcement, and I wanted to have my own gun because it was a really nice gun and it had interchangeable barrels. And I said, "May I have my gun?" And he got really upset physically. You could see his blood pressure rising, and he had a pocket sewed into the side of his chair that his wife.
But you were asking him for this gun how many years later?
Oh my God, 11 to 22. That's 10 to 12 years later or something like that.
Yeah. So he pretty much didn't remember him. I mean, he pretty much didn't remember buying you this gun, did he?
No, he remembered.
Oh, he remembered.
He said, "I paid for that gun."
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was.
But he just refused to give it to you.
Yes.
So how was your relationship with your biological father? After leaving the home with the stepfather, did you ever have the opportunity to spend any time, with your biological father?
Nope. Once the papers were signed, and Mom told him, "If you sign these papers over, you won't have to pay back child support." He signed them off, and I never saw him until I was in my 20s.
So so from the age of a teenager and into the time you turned about 22 years old, you saw your father a few times, but you guys,
on the street maybe.
On the street, but you guys never had a relationship, never talked, never did father and son type of things or anything like that.
Nope.
Wow.
Nope. After the visitation, after he signed me over, he wanted nothing to do with me. He had a new life, a new wife 3 kids,
Did you ever
3
meet
other kids
any
from
of,
them.
did you meet his new wife?
Yeah, at the funeral.
You did, and did you meet the new children?
Yeah.
And they are his kids, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
do you have a relationship with your brothers and sisters, or?
No, I only met him again at the family reunion last August. I went to a family reunion and I met him. I met him at the funeral before that.
And how are they?
Well, one was a Marine, served in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the other one's a golf pro up in northern Michigan, and they're well adjusted and knew who I was right away because I look a lot, almost identical to my biological father. You know, I look a lot like him, so they knew who I was when I went to the picnic when I got out
Did
of
you
the car.
guys share telephone numbers and talk about
Yes,
your
yes,
kids
with
and
my
family and stuff?
uncles. I've got uncles, his brothers, that are still living. You know, they invited me to go to Arizona. One lives in Arizona.
So
him and
there's
his wife.
kind of like a little happy ending here.
Yeah.
You may not have the greatest relationship with your father, but from his offsprings and stuff, which is your brothers and sisters, you've been having a pretty good relationship with them.
No, we don't stay in touch all the time, but one of my uncles
Well, not
I do.
24/7, but you
Yeah.
guys have.
They're aware of me and they know
right.
I'm around.
And you're
so-
more closer to them than you was with your own father.
Yeah, surprisingly, got along real well with him, and I thought it was great. It is great. A lot of positive notes come out of this. I will never, ever be abusive like that to a child. If I get married someday, I'm going to be, I think, the best dad I can be, you know.
That's
Try
good.
to be,
Right.
you know.
I get mixed emotions from you here. You
Well, I'm over it now.
right.
There's no mixed emotions about it. I'm over it now. I look back at it now and say, I'm just
back
glad he
then,
didn't make
though.
good on his threats of killing me or my mother. That's all, you know. And deep down, I don't think he was all that bad of a person, but he was a criminal, and he got
In what
caught.
way,
He was a ridge runner. He ran moonshine and hookers for the mob, and he got caught in Georgia, and he was forced to go in the army, and that's why he went in the army. He worked for Al Capone.
So that was before meeting your mom, right?
Oh yeah, way before that. Yeah, way before
So
he even
that
knew my mother.
explains the reason why
My
he
mom was 14 years younger than him.
Well, so that explains that he was such a bully toward you is because that's the type of behavior that he learned growing up.
Yeah, it is a learned behavior. It is a very learned behavior. That's why I was afraid to be in relationships. Like you asked me before, how would that affect me? I was afraid that I'd be turning out like him. And I always tell myself, I'll never be like you. I never want to be like him. And I've been tested to that, you know, because children can be children and they will test you. You know, when you babysit, I have babysat friends, kids, and stuff like that when I was older, and they would test you and push you to the limit. And I'd have to stop myself, you know, and say, I'm not going to be like my stepdad. No way.
What kind of advice that you can give to someone who probably is experiencing, you know, the things that you experienced when you was a child? If there's a child out here that's experiencing some type of physical or mental abuse coming from a parent, whether it's a step parent or not, what type of advice that you can give that person? I'm just looking at camera and tell someone what type of advice that that you would give them.
Find a trusted adult, a police officer, a teacher. Tell them. Get it on tape. You know, everybody's got digital recordings. Record it, you know. Find somebody and tell somebody, and don't take it anymore. Get away from it, you know. Just please get away from it, because there's somebody out there, and there's a lot of more people out there that won't like that. So just get away, tell somebody, and they'll get the help they need.
Okay. Is there any advice that you can tell a parent that's out here that may be abusing their own child? What kind of advice could you tell a parent that's probably abusing their own child? You know, any type of words of wisdom or knowledge that you can say to them that would get them to stop doing that?
Take a step back, take a breath. Whatever is causing you to do this is within you. It's not that child's fault, they're just a kid. So take a deep breath and think about what you're doing. Because if you don't hurt that child or kill them, you're going to hurt them in the long run, and it's going to affect how they're going to grow up. So stop what you're doing. Just stop. Take a step back. They're just little kids. They don't deserve the abuse you're doing. Find out what's going on in your life and stop doing that.
About your stepfather before he passed away, how did you feel about it?
I felt sorry for him. He had cancer and he was in a great deal of pain. I felt sad. I just hoped that he found the Lord and he was forgiven and he's with the Lord now. That's all I hope.
So through it all down with with all the physical and mental abuse, you're able to go on in life though now.
Yeah,
and that's real good.
I'm in college. I'm taking voiceover acting classes. I take care of my mother, help take care of the bills. I moved in the house, take care of the house, and it's like natural with me because it's the house I grew up in. So cleaning that house is nothing. Trying to keep up with the dust is something else. But hey.
So do you feel like you regrowing all over again, growing up all over again? You feel like you growing up all over again? Being back in that house. Do you even have any type of feelings or resolutions, about your stepfather now that he's deceased and you're back in the house? How do you feel being back there?
At first, I felt anxious, very, very relieved, and almost dominating. Like, hey, I can handle this, and he's not here to say anything bad to me. I can handle cleaning the house. So what if I missed a spot?
Do you ever have any flashbacks about how your stepfather was?
I've waken up in the middle of the night. When I first moved there, like the ghosts of him saying. Now, my mom has a little bit of dementia, so she might say something like what he used to say. She lived with him for 44 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
They were married a long time. And so some of the same words that came out of her mouth, which I know it's not her, it's the disease. It's that talking. So I find I'll have a flashback then, and I get a little upset, and I'll start to yell, and then I have to remember that, well, my mom can't hear anyway, but I have to talk loud to her. But if I start yelling, then I'm really, really loud, and that scares her, and then out of fear, then she'll lash out too. So that was at first. Now it's nothing. I know he's gone. There's no such thing as ghosts. Whatever I was hearing was in my head. Especially if I didn't clean something right, that's the big thing. So what? I missed the dog turd out in the yard. Big deal. I'm not gonna let myself, but I catch myself doing it. Like, God, I got to get this corner cleaned. And the woodwork has got to be cleaned, and let's make sure everything's okay. So,
do you miss your stepfather?
Do I miss him? Oh no, I don't miss him. I'm glad that I don't miss him. I don't miss anything. Because he was in his 80s when he passed, so he had a good life, a long life. I don't know how great it was, but he lived a long life. He served our country, and I respect that. I mean, he did some things that I only overheard conversations given to my brother and sister of what he had to do when he was in the service. So, I respect that.
Is there anything that you would do different now that you didn't do back then and there while your stepfather was still living? And if so, what is it that you would do different that you didn't do back then?
Ooh. I don't think a thing other than that Thanksgiving I wouldn't break into the school.
Would you have obeyed your stepfather much more, or would you
Well, I would have went to the police.
So that's what you would have done different.
Yeah.
You would have went to the police.
I wouldn't have been so afraid to go to the police. I was afraid to go to the police because I thought he was in on it with, I thought the police were in on it with him, because he was always threatening to send me to prison and all that stuff.
And naturally, as a child, you felt that he had that type of power.
He was a very well-respected person, and he used to get certificates in the mail from the state of Michigan, and they looked like police badges.
Oh, okay.
For safe driving awards, so it made me think that he was, okay, well, it wouldn't do any good to call the police. So don't let that happen. If you
Go ahead.
don't ever let that happen. If you think they're an authority figure, they are no excuse for that. Even if they are an authority figure, there's no excuse for child abuse, none whatsoever.
That's very true. You know, it has really been a pleasure to have you here on the show, talking with you today, and
Thank you.
sharing, some of the things that you had to experience when you was a child.